Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Sisterhood Society podcast. And we have replaced Tara once again because
we kicked Tara off because she doesn't like books. So we've replaced her with our friend Jen here.
Yes.
I do like books.
Yes, exactly. Anything bookish, Tara just stays out of, which is fine because we have a very large bookish community here at the Sisterhood Society. So if she doesn't want to be a part of it, it's totally fine. But she's got to come up with her own thing, which we're thinking she's going to start a TV club. She's discussed.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Anyways, honestly, she should do it about Dateline.
You really should. She never misses a Dateline. And I feel like a lot of people like Dateline enough that they could have something to chat about,
Yeah, that or 2020. So anyways, here is Jen, our sweet friend on the podcast. And the reason we brought Jen on is because she is an author and we both found her book and wanted to read it and both fell in love with it. So today is going to be all things author related to Jen. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but we'll have you do an intro of yourself first and then tell us what's good in your life after. So why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So yes. I'm Jen Woodrum. I am an author of a YA dystopian fantasy novel, but that's my side hobby. I actually am a therapist and a clinical supervisor in the child welfare and community mental health field. So I'm really passionate about mental health and even try to include concepts related to mental health and trauma in my books. But yeah, I love all things books and writing. I have a bookstagram and I love sharing things about writing and reading with people online.
I love it. I also, this is a side tangent, but I connected with another friend who I think that you know through the writing world named Christy Strong.
Yes. Oh, her book. All right. If anyone needs a new book to read soon, Balloon Days by Christy Strong. I've been in a reading slump pretty much all year. I feel like I haven't found that many books that really blew me away. And her book absolutely blew me away.
That's amazing. So, well, one, it's hilarious because her last name matches Whitney's. And I've never met another person with last name Strong. And Isaac has 77, I'm not actually exaggerating. I think he has 77 cousins. So I was like, somehow they're probably related.
Probably.
And she lives in New York, right? Up in the East Coast. Yeah. But what I was going to say is you and her, and then another author I've connected with named Saget Schwartz are all therapists or counselors, and you guys all do therapy by day, writing by night, and I've convinced that you guys write the best books.
I truly think that is a thing. I think you guys understand the human psyche better than anybody else and are able to write about it better than anybody else.
I love that. I think there's truth to it that we do a lot of learning, a lot of work with people. And I think that writing itself is very therapeutic. So we may be processing a lot of things and we understand the importance of processing. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's so fun. Yeah. So her book is all about entering almost like a room that you can change into whatever you want it to be to process your emotions and feelings, right?
Yeah, it's this therapy center that offers this new medication that you take that enters you into a lucid dream type state. And it seems like this fantastical, you can process your trauma or create a situation that you want to experience to heal. But then it doesn't really seem like everything's quite right. As people go through it, it's also some things maybe aren't always so perfect. And I love that kind of eerie element that it had.
Yeah, I'm so excited to read it. I just got it in the mail from Amazon and it was really cute because she's going through, and then we'll get into you. Sorry, this is total side tangent. She's going through IVF as well and just connecting on infertility stuff together, which was really sweet. So we voice texted for an hour on Instagram. She DM'd me because I was talking about this special diet I went on for egg retrieval. And anyways, she was like, I found your video because of Jen and I saw that you had posted about IVF. And so we just had all these connections. And then so I bought her book and she bought a dress from Royal and Reese. So it was really cute and mutual. It's really cool. So we want to know more about you and your book, but first of all, we're going to start with something that's good in your life. We'll all three share something good and positive because it's good to set intention and mindset before we get into the conversation. So what's good in your life?
Today is my wedding anniversary, so that's exciting. 6 years, and we're going to celebrate tonight with a nice dinner in a neighboring town. I'm going to get some sushi.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's exciting.
Where are you getting sushi? I need to know the details because I know you guys are foodies and like kind of know the good spots.
Yes. So we're going to, in Champaign, Illinois, a place called Co-Fusion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See,
So
I've
good.
never been there, but we like places where I can get sushi and Kyle can get something else. So like he can get a ribeye and I can get sushi.
That's cool. Yeah, actually, my two brother-in-laws went to U of I when we were in college, and they didn't have a car, so we always had to go get them. We're all like 1 year apart, like stair steps of each other. And so we would always go pick them up and get sushi there. It's like the only place in central Illinois that has like less than questionable sushi options, because when you live on the coast, you like don't really trust the sushi options. So, but it's actually very good and very fresh.
She means when you live in a landlocked state.
Well, we've lived on the coast. We lived in California. So like when you get used to having like fish from, the coast, you question it once you move to central Illinois. So
it's funny because if you've only ever lived in Illinois, I feel like I'll just eat $4 sushi and be content.
You're like, this is fine. It's a hibachi grill. It's probably been frozen and go with it. Okay, so it's your anniversary, Whit. What is your good?
My good. So this week we actually got to have dinner with Isaac's, I guess it's technically Isaac's boss, but they used to be missionaries in Austria, but to the Iranian refugees over there. So it was like they were in like a German atmosphere, but they were speaking Farsi and like engulfed in Iranian culture, which I think is the coolest thing, like Persian culture. And so she made a Persian dinner for us, and it was fantastic. And it was really,
that was amazing.
It was so much fun. And she's like, yeah, there's some people like we came back to the States and like they were over there for like, I think at least 10 years, if not more. And she's like, we came back to the States and you just realize that like life has moved on, but like our life has been like all over the place. And when they like are telling people about their time over there, sometimes people just like their eyes kind of glaze over because it literally is foreign to people. They don't understand it. And anyways, it was so much fun. I loved hearing all about it. I love trying out all the food, and they like told us how they take their tea and like just kind of like the way they prepare meals, and they like sit down and have a meal together. It was so cool. So that was really, really fun for us this week.
That's awesome.
I love that. Okay, what's my good? Honestly, it's kind of like a general thing, but my husband is home until the 14th, which if you guys know, that's a lot because he's normally gone every weekend or gone for 2 weeks, home for a week. So he's home until the 14th, and then they're doing their last leg of touring, and then he's done pretty much for the year. So I think I said that as my good the last time, but it's just really good because he's around.
Well, the last time I think you said he came home but he had a kidney stone.
Oh gosh, yeah. Last weekend, it's a whole nother story, but he went to the ER while he was on the road and he was passing a kidney stone. And so then when he was home, it was like miserable because he was still passing it. So he was like in tons of pain. And like, I know like I wasn't in pain, but like watching him be in pain was like so uncomfortable because you can't do anything about it. And so like, I didn't like enjoy the time he was home because he was like not feeling good, didn't have an appetite. Whatever. We went to the doctor. And
then he ended up passing it like a few hours before he had to leave.
Yeah. He had bus call and he passed it in the morning and he had bus call at like 4. We're like, cool. So now you're finally good and you can go back, and we had a crappy week. So anyways, it's been good to like go out to dinner or sit on the patio and like just have like intentional time together without being like, okay, we only have 2 days until he's gone again. So this past weekend for Memorial Day, I was saying on the last podcast, I did a lot of reading, which Tara doesn't like to hear my reading updates. So I have to save them. It's become this like really big inside joke because she's like does not support literate women. And I'm just kidding, but it's funny because last weekend she was on her back porch and she was laying out because they have a really nice pool. And she was like, I only have Briggs. The other three are with our brother-in-law, Brian, had taken them fishing to like a little farm his friend owned. And she's like, Briggs is sleeping. And so, one kid is so easy. And he's like, I'm just out here by myself and I kind of feel bored. And she goes, I would buy a book, but maybe like, I don't want to, or something like that. And she's like, but she suggested like, it would be kind of nice if I had a book right now. So deep down, the interest is there,
I think if she were bored enough, she would, but like, there are times when the times where she wants to like wind down instead of reading like the rest of us do. She watches like Dateline or crime series, which I don't know how she can do that right before she goes to bed, but
I know. Okay, so let's get into this interview and ask you about this book. I want to know
first of all, I think we haven't even said her full name. Oh, well, I think she did actually. So Jen Woodrum, the book that she has written, which is phenomenal. We've screamed it from the rooftops and we're so excited about it. It's called When Death is Coming. And you can get it on Amazon or you can get a signed copy on Etsy, which is what I did. And I'm very excited about it. I got the electronic version to get on my Kindle. And then I got like a signed copy, which she hand gave me.
And I put them in cute little wrapping paper for you too.
It was so cute. I literally am obsessed with it. I have it on my nightstand in like a prominent place. And I'm just like, my favorite little book. So cute.
Well, Whitney, I guess I should lead in with this and then we'll ask you the questions. Whitney had told me that she had a friend that was coming out with a book. And then she said your name. And I was like, I know that name. Like, where do I know the name Woodrum from? And then she's like, yeah, she's married to Kyle. So Kyle was a couple years younger than us, I think. Because how old are you?
Gosh, who knows? 29.
Turning 30 soon. I'm 34, or I'll be 34 this month. So he was doing an internship, I think, with Lincoln, right? At Eastview. Yeah. He went to Lincoln Christian College and then was doing an internship with Drew, the youth pastor.
Yes, I didn't know him then, but that sounds like that could be right.
Yeah. You're like, sure. So I met him through just like ministry stuff. Like we weren't like super close friends, but I knew who he was. So when she said your last name, I was like, oh, that's so cool. So obviously we're both avid readers. Whitney ripped through it and was like, you have to read this. It's so good. And she's like, but don't say anything until you're done. Because if you don't like it, like, we don't want to hurt my friend's feelings. And I'm like, I'm sure I'm going to love it.
I was like, please love it as much as I do.
What I tell my friends and family is like, if you don't like it, just lie. That's really okay.
Just don't tell the truth. So yeah, I ended up loving it. We've been posting about it on social. And then I made a TikTok about it, which has been super fun because the TikTok community is incredibly supportive, which I'll get into that with our questions later. But my first question I would like to ask you is just in general, like why you were interested in writing, and then where did you come up with the idea for your book?
Yeah, that's such a cool question. So my love for writing goes way back. I think in elementary school is some of the first times that I started to explore stories. I remember getting this assignment. We were supposed to write a story on a little pumpkin, and I wrote like 13 pages and just started that idea of like, I can create worlds. And then in my senior year of high school, I was in an advanced creative writing class and had the first idea of what would happen if everyone's death dates became public knowledge. And it was around the time when the Hunger Games, and I think it was a little bit before Divergent maybe, but it was around that time that dystopian fiction was starting to take off. So just that feel of a world where this knowledge is known, and we know society can be very broken. So how would people take that information and run with it, and what could happen? So I started to 2011 was the first moment that Corey and Auden existed in a very different draft, but I first started that idea then. And then it rested for a while, but then I came back to it about maybe 6 years ago. And just the cool thing about that premise is that there's so many different things you can explore, like for how many different places would handle that information differently. And then even deeper than that, how does that information come to be known? What might be going on beneath the surface that created that information to be available to people. So I'm really excited to explore some of those concepts in the future books.
Totally. Well, I guess my interview is so backwards. I'm really bad at interviewing because I didn't even give a synopsis, but basically this book, I'm like, this is the way my brain works. So if people listen to the podcast, they're not surprised, but my brain works in zigzags, not straight lines. So I'm so sorry. I need to say the synopsis of the book, but essentially, do you want to explain that really quick, or like, what would you explain it, pitch it? What's your pitch?
Well, the funny thing is that I feel like you gave a better synopsis of my book than I ever have. Like when I listened to your TikTok, I was like, whoa, she needs to write my blurbs. But so I alluded to the basic premise, which is that this book takes place in a world where death dates have become public knowledge, and in this society where the first book takes place, it's been utilized to oppress people. So people who are short-lived are not given privileges. They are put to work because their lives are not considered as valuable as people who are going to live long. So my main character, Corey, she is a 4. She is born with a 4 tattooed on the back of her neck, which means that she's going to die before she turns 20. And people are categorized into these tiers based on when they will die, and everyone has these tattoos to signify that. So she's in this work camp, and she is trying to create change secretly because there's other people who are trying to create change and get freedom through more like rebellion, like kind of like your typical dystopian leads. But Corey thinks that if she can move up through leadership, she can create change. But soon she has some experiences happen that throw things off. She learns how soon her death date really is coming. And she learns that she has a family outside of the work camp that she's never met. And then you'll have to find out where things go from there by reading it.
Right. And I think it was interesting too, how she didn't realize she had a family, but obviously since they're all different numbers, they get split. So it's like, you could have a dad that's a 9 that's going to live a normal, quote unquote life, like a full life. But you could have a sister who's a 5 or 6 who's only going to live to like their 30s or 40s or whatever the age characterization is. But I guess I wanted to compliment you on the fact that, one, not that there's anything wrong with it being a debut author, but I feel like there's so much pressure on someone's first book because it can kind of set you up to either really succeed or fail based on people's first impression of who you are as a writer. And sometimes I feel like it can even go the opposite way. Like Carly Fortune's first book, Every Summer After, like skyrocketed. And then her second one is getting it's, at least from my experience, not very great reviews. It's very split. And so there's a lot of pressure either way, I guess, whether it takes off or it doesn't. But I really felt like the thing I think is hard in fantasy and dystopian worlds is a lot of the world building happens within the first 100 and 200 pages, and you can lose people very quickly because they're like, oh my gosh, like I understand the politics, like let's get to it, especially when people are used to having like instant gratification with everything in our world. And so I feel like you did a really good job with the rebellion scene in the very first 50 or so pages that actually gives you something to like grasp onto and be like, okay, we're moving, like but we didn't really know everything about the world yet. We didn't know about her or really the dynamics of anything, and we got some action. So I was really impressed with the way that you started that, because I feel like that's usually where people are like, okay, this is boring, like, I need to move the story along, and it really captured us right away.
Oh, thank you. I tend to be a very fast-paced writer. So I think that's some compliment that I've gotten about this book. I mean, some people want the pace slowed, and that's okay too. Everyone's got their preferences, but I really like that. I mean, it moves quick, and you're going to be on a journey with the character that just, to me, it flies by.
Right. Whit, did you have any first impressions when you were first reading it?
Even like the first few pages, it just like sucks you in because you're like, what is that? I need to know. And so, I love that it was fast paced, because it does, especially if it's young adult. It's not like you're writing this for adults who have like a longer attention span. For young adult, it's perfect pacing.
Mhm.
But also it's great for adults too, because I was obsessed with it. I liked how quickly it moved. I like that there's still questions that I'm like, what's going to happen? I need to know. So I'm still extremely invested, even though I finished the book like a month ago. I'm still thinking about it. Yeah, I feel like the whole concept of death dates and like knowing your death date, knowing what tier you're in is super fascinating. Like the whole concept in the world that you built is, it's not just like, oh, they're a vampire and they're training in vampire training. You know, like you actually created something very fascinating that I haven't heard many people talk about, or like many people try to do.
Mhm.
So it's very creative. And then one scene that is still, when you were talking about the tiers, one scene that's still enraptured in my mind is the ones, because obviously you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. There's one scene where they show the ones, which are babies, and it's this nursery, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but there's this nursery where it's just completely silent because they've learned nobody's going to come comfort them. And I'm like, that's so sad. But also I've heard that actually is a thing in like third world countries, and like not adoption agencies, but in orphanages.
Yeah.
Where the babies learn to not cry because no one's going to be coming and comforting them. And that like really hit me. I'm just like, she's drawing from real life things. Oh, so sad.
There's a big truth to that. I mean, that some of the scenes and the premises in this book are challenging, and it's not, I mean, there's hope. I think there's a lot of hope and positivity ingrained in the book, but there's darkness. I mean, it covers hard topics related to mortality and what people are capable of. And that scene especially, it was hard to write, but there's a book that I'd recommend for anyone interested in trauma called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Bruce Perry. That covers like developmental trauma, and he describes like these Russian orphanages from the past, not present, but children who came to the U.S. and that was the experience. Like they had experienced so much neglect that they learned not to expect that their needs would be met. So as hard as it is, like we are capable of bad in the world, and we are capable of good. And that's the hope that I want to instill in the book and throughout the series, is that like even though there can be darkness, there also can be light, and that's not the end. Like even though that happens, there's still more to the story, that people are always going to fight for good.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on too is that like when you're a new author, you have to sort of compare yourself to what people know. So when people are like, what's it like? You're like, okay, it's kind of like Hunger Games, but it's not at all. And it's kind of like Divergent, but it's really not like that at all. And then you're like, and it kind of has elements of The Measure, but it's not as sad. Like, I just feel like it's hard to, you know, it's kind of like when someone's like, what kind of musician or artist are you? And you're like, okay, well, I sound like nothing like Adele, but I guess it's kind of like, you know what I mean? You're like trying to compare yourself so that people can find somewhere to land and like relate to your book. How did you draw inspiration from other books you've read, but still try to keep things like authentic and genuine without making it feel too similar to like popular series, I guess is what I was going to say.
Wow, that's also a really good question. So like I said, to ponder it. I started this idea around when the Hunger Games came out, and I think that influenced the feel of the book. And I think that that's what you notice in a lot of like dystopian or even in other genres. There is a feel or a vibe that you may notice themes of. But I think that I had my own story to tell that pushed a lot of pushed a lot of boundaries. Like there's things that happen in the book, like maybe at the end that like some other books wouldn't do, or and even in future books too. I like to push boundaries, and there are things that I try to make different with, like Corey, for example, my main character. Like I said, she's not a traditional dystopian lead. There's actually a side character that a lot of people really like, so I love that, but she's more of the let's rebel, let's fight the system. And what I really like is that Corey shows that there are different ways to try to fight, and both are valuable. And I love that over the story, you kind of see how like perspectives change or people grow to empathize with one another. but I'm a rule follower. I'm the one who would probably try to make change through leadership or by doing the right thing. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I like that there's some maybe tropes that were kind of turned on their head. I did not include a love triangle, and that's just something that like I stand behind because some people really love that in YA fiction. For me, it just wasn't part of my story. So there were things that I tried to just make my own by maybe going against what might be traditional.
I was going to say too, in romance, I just talked about this on a TikTok video last night, but in romance, I really struggle believing in the love if there's not enough dialogue. And I feel like a lot of authors, like that's one of the biggest, I'm sorry not to go back to this book. I feel like I'm dogging on it, even though I really didn't like it. With Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune, everyone's biggest beef with it is that she told you instead of showing you their love story. She was like, well, they did fall in love 14 years ago. And you're like, well, I didn't see that in what you told us, showed us in the story. But what I was going to say is I feel like you use dialogue in a way that you understand people's like you're saying, like their psyche to resolve conflict instead of brute force. Like, and one example of that would be when she meets certain family members, which I won't say which one or how, but she asked like why, instead of like being like, okay, how do I shoot him and kill him? Like she was just like, she wanted to know like the reasonings why this person did what they did when she finds some of her family members. I thought that made the story like so much more deep and complex instead of just being like, okay, how do I survive by, killing everyone in sight? And that actually makes it more exciting, I think, to read if you understand the why behind what people do, which is why people like crime novels or thrillers, right? Like they want to know why people tick, essentially.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like relationships are what that's what I always care about the most in books. I care about relationships and I care about the character. And there's definitely hard lessons that she learns along the way about what family means. And I think that's like a theme of the book. I love the found family trope in really any novel. But, learning that there are people who are going to choose someone else over you. And then there are people who are going to choose you. And those are the people that you call your family.
Totally. Okay. Wait, do you want to add anything before I move to the next question?
No, I feel like I don't want to say too much.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to talk about it, but
yeah, I don't want to say too much and give the book away because you guys just need to read it because it's so freaking good. So that's what I'll add.
Thank you, Whit.
I know. I feel like we're kind of nailing this interview, right? Okay. My next question I had written down was, what do you feel like you have learned in the writing process of the first book from interacting with like ARC readers? Like if people don't know what that stands for, it stands for, what is it? Early
Advanced Reader Copy.
Thank you. I can never remember. From ARC readers or just readers like from social media, do you feel like you would do something different when you're writing the second one based on feedback from readers?
Yeah. So I will say there is so much positivity in the reviews, which has been so encouraging. And there's always still critiques. And I think it's harder receiving those when you're at this stage. Like I had many rounds of beta readers, which are people who like read and give feedback. So over the years I had a lot. And when you get feedback, then you're like, great, I can do something about that. And then when you get a critique when it's out, you're like, well, nothing I can do there. Totally. But I can take that and learn from it. And there's been a couple that have been like a little harsher and it hurts, but I have to choose to focus on the positive and then what I can control. So how can I take that and grow from it? And there are definitely things that I'm like, as I'm working on the next book, which is so much more complicated in a lot of ways, it's been a lot harder to write. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that I'm trying to focus on bringing into it, like especially character growth, like just ways to improve my writing. And I noticed that I've learned a lot through the experience of writing this book. I have a couple of drafts that I had written even before When Death Is Coming. So like you just over time, you see your writing grow and improve.
Totally.
Actually, I like that we kind of touched on the writing process because I feel like that's something I'm fascinated about because you're an indie author, independent author. So you're doing this all on your own. Tell us a little bit more about like that process? Like, I know you had to open up your own like publishing like
Yeah.
name, right?
Yeah. So, and I can maybe even start by talking a little bit about just like the different options, because I always thought that I want to traditionally publish. It just feels like the way to go if you're a writer. It sometimes feels like the only option. So I queried for a while, and it is just an extremely competitive world. So after a long time, and I did it on and off, rejection's hard too. So like I'd face the rejection and then I'd table it for 6 months. But I explored self-publishing last year after I started to think if I don't take matters into my own hands, no one's going to read it. And I'm okay with, even if just a couple of hundred people read it, at least if people read it, that's the goal. So last summer is when I started to explore self-publishing. And what was your question about the process?
Yeah, just the process.
Okay.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so there were a lot of steps along the way. I created my own publishing imprint, which really isn't that big of a deal. It was like creating like doing business as, it feels cool to have my own publishing imprint. So I created that so that I could have all of my books that I'll publish someday under the same publisher. And just, there were so many different steps along the way to learn about, continuing to get editors, getting a cover designer, planning for marketing, developing my platform, and then all the formatting, the details of actually physically getting it out there, choosing how to self-publish it. I went through Amazon, but there's so many different options out there. So what I love is that really in any world of creating a business or publishing a book, there's a community of people who know things. And by joining that community, I feel like I learned a lot and was able to be supported by others, and then also now support others who are in earlier stages of the process. So finding my community has been the biggest help along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And how do you feel like social media changed the trajectory of things for you? And do you feel like besides your own, like, because you're really good at reels, like I'm horrible at reels. Like you do like all the cutesy like voiceovers, and like you come up with really funny ideas for popular sounds, whereas like my shtick is just like I talk about books. Like I don't do any of the like funny, because I'm not creative when it comes to that. So do you feel like majority of your readers have come from finding you through that, or is it from or how do you feel like that helped, I guess?
Oh, it helped so much. I think if I was just publishing without having created a platform on Instagram and a little bit TikTok, I feel like I still have not figured TikTok out.
It's hard.
I'm trying to just understand how it works. But through that platform, I feel like is where I've met most of the people who became interested in my book. And it's such a supportive community, supportive of indie authors.
Yeah.
And I initially created my writing page just to share like posts. I would post like, I'm writing with my cereal, like just little things like that. And then I learned that, Reels is what it's moving towards. But then I ended up starting to have a lot of fun with it and creating like goofy, silly things. Putting my face on the internet is a whole, a whole thing to adjust to.
Totally. It is. It's like a weird necessary evil about social media. It's kind of hard, but because I've found too that I follow a handful of authors that I really like. And one of them, besides you, that I've become really good friends with, I talk about all the time. She probably thinks I'm such a creep, but we talk every day. Her name's Jamie Jail Hyde, and she writes thrillers, and she's independently published as well. And she had a couple of TikTokers basically like find her book, read it, and then blew up. And I don't know if I know my review of her book did well, but I don't think I was like the main person. There was one girl specifically that got like 70,000 views, and a ton of people went and bought her book. Or 70,000 views, not reviews, sorry. And her whole shtick on TikTok is like, one, she's super sarcastic and she's really funny about like, she has very dry humor and she's very like black and white, which I think is so fun. But she also like, I think her shtick toward authors is like, here's some things that helped me. So she's always talking to like the small writing, like indie community. And then her other thing is, and this is getting into my next question. I have a hot take, but her other thing is how grateful she is for readers. And her perspective is always like, if I give you an arc, there's no expectations. I don't expect a review. If you want to and you liked it, great. If not, like, and she's constantly like stitching people that have reviewed it and saying thank you. And like the gratitude just makes you like fall in love with this person, because she's so obsessed with like anybody that reads her book. And she's always saying like how lovely that person is and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I just feel like that's become almost like her brand, is like how kind she is and like thankful. And so there's some, I don't know if you are clued in on TikTok book talk drama, but there's currently a big TikTok book talk drama going on.
Oh, tell me about it.
There's this girl who wrote, she had the same thing happen to her that Paris Hilton did, where her parents woke her up in the middle of the night and took her to like a work camp where she was going to be like a survival camp. Like basically they like take you in the middle of the night and they fly you to this camp in like Utah or Colorado, and you have no idea where you're going or what's happening. So she tells the story about it like as she's eating a salad in her car, and the video goes viral, and she wrote a book, like a memoir. So I don't know if she was trying to be funny, but she went on TikTok, and her review, she gave out like 8 arcs, and she said, I had a perfect 4-star or 5-star rating until this B word rated my book a 4-star. And she's like, she said that the ending is predictable, but this is my life. So what do you expect? Or something like really hateful and disgusting. And when I tell you the book talk community came after this girl, everybody went from her having 8 reviews on TikTok to now Goodreads actually took down the ability to rate her book because she got so many 1 stars that you're now blocked from like rating it, because I think Goodreads saw that people were spamming her. And basically there was like, the last time I checked, there was over 700 people that just like went, and everyone's making videos about it and stuff. So the consensus is the book community constantly says reviews are not for authors, they're for readers.
Yes.
And I know we just said, like, you being a new author, you kind of have to look at them, but like, what is the given, like the push and pull of that for you? And what is your hot take about how you feel about readers' reviews and authors getting involved in all of that?
Oh my gosh, I feel this so strongly. So for one, I try to actually not look at my reviews too much. I did for my ARC reviews. I was just excited, but I really do try to pull myself back from that, because it is not for me. It is for you to share what other people like, and not everyone's going to like my book. And sometimes I make myself feel better by looking at the Hunger Games. I'll look at like all the 1-star reviews and be like, all right, it's all right. People don't like everything, and that's okay. And I'm almost excited for when I get like 1 or 2-star reviews, because that means it's just getting in more people's hands, and it's okay.
Right.
And so I totally agree. And I think that, we can't be too prideful about it. I mean, it is art that we're creating, and not everyone likes every type of art.
And it's subjective because people interpret things differently. And I even find, I don't know if I've told Whitney this before, but I feel like we've had this conversation. Like if I'm in a bad place in life and I'm like depressed and sad, I might rate that book worse because I read it when I was depressed and sad. Like I might not like it because something is going on in my life. You know what I mean?
It's true. I was just going to say, I was muted. I was like, no, it is true, because you like loved The Midnight Library, and you're like, it's such a cozy book. Like, I just loved it because you like read it at Christmas time. You read it at like your fireplace, and you had like ambiance music in the background. It has taken me like a year and a half to try to get through that book because it triggers me so badly.
It is a sad
I've been in her shoes where she's like so depressed, and I'm like, why do people like this book? Like, and you're the one where you're like, it's such a cozy read. I was like, how? How is that a cozy read?
That's so true. I did feel very cozy when I read it because it was Christmas time and I read it by the fire, and I was like, this looks great. I also bought it for my sister-in-law, and she read it in one sitting because she's a lawyer. So she, like, attorneys read, for a living, basically. And she read it so fast. And I was like, what'd you think? And she was like, it was interesting. She was just like not impressed, probably. I'm like, okay, cool.
Oh, that was one of my favorite books last year.
Okay, so Kyle, just side note, I knew Kyle before I knew Jen, because Kyle actually used to be one of our student like musicians back when Isaac and I were helping out with high school worship. And so I've known Kyle for a really long time. And I was like, Kyle, like, how you do? I always like try to chat him up when I used to play with him. And he told me about his wife writing a book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really into books. Like, tell me what's her favorite. And he's like, oh, right now she's like loves Midnight Library. And I was like, no. And he's like, no, you should finish it. You should finish it. I was like, I don't think I can. So every time I saw Kyle, he's like, did you finish it? I was like, no, I haven't. So anyways, that's my little inside joke with your husband. And I am going to try to finish it because you have said you loved it so much. Everybody else says they love it so much. I'm just in the middle of it and I'm just like, I cannot. I was like, just pick a life and live there. Please. And be happy with it. Anyways, so yeah, the Midnight Library, I can attest to the fact that depending on where you're at in life or what mood you're in, it can affect what you're reading and how you're like attaining the knowledge, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to come back to what you said about gratitude for readers, though, because I feel like you spoke on that. And I just do want to highlight that, like with how I said that social media influenced my book being able to get out there. I mean, even just your TikTok made a huge difference. Like I know I had shared about this, but like when you have your release day, you have your peak and it's great. And then things start to balance out, and you sharing it on TikTok, like things, it goes up, and it makes a huge difference for an indie author because, I mean, I don't have a ton of sales, and that's okay. Like, that's what I expect. But anytime I see someone like posting that they're reading my book, I'm like, I'll never get over it. I'll never get over like seeing my book cover on somewhere. And I'm always just so thankful for anyone who decides to give it a shot, because there are so many books out there and everyone's TBRs are massive. So it does mean so much to see something.
Yeah. And in general, the indie author community, because of TikTok, I feel like is growing by the day. Like there's obviously some that have come out on top, and like a lot of TikTokers have. I mean, I think Book Talk has changed the trajectory of reading, because Barnes and Noble was like on the edge of going out of business during COVID, and now like thriving because books are cool right now. Like reading is like trendy. So, but I feel like I have indie authors follow me all day, every day. And I didn't know that you could message on TikTok. I'm such a grandma. And I like opened my messages the other day, and I had like a bunch of people being like, hi, I'm an indie author. I saw you review an indie author. Like, can I send you my book? And I was like, oh my gosh, I like didn't even know you could message on TikTok. And I'm like, sure. And people keep being like, do you have a PO box? And I'm like, I think people think I'm like more professional than I am. Like, no, I sit on my carpet in my room. Like, I don't do this for a living. But yeah, I think that it's been really cool to see it, but it does feel like the competition is thick. And I feel the same way. We talk about this with retail. Like, you can buy clothes literally anywhere these days, and it becomes so competitive, but it's like, what is it that sticks out to people about you? Like, what is the thing that sets you apart? And I feel the same way, that we always pray, like, as you know, if days are hard, we always like, God, give us glimpses of hope, of like that we're on the right track, we're doing the right thing, and then like something else will come through that makes you be like, okay, I'm doing what I should be, right? And so I feel like a review, I feel like as an author, would make me feel like, okay, I'm doing the right thing, I'm in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one perspective that helps me too, though, in the communities, because it is so easy to compare, but I really try to just focus on like, we can celebrate each other, and it isn't a competition. And I think that just helps my mental state of like, when I see other people doing well, or I see just like, there's so many of us in the field, but like, we are each other's biggest cheerleaders. And I love that like a lot of my readers have been indie authors. I'm reading a lot of indie books, and it's just nice to know that like, it's a supportive place where we can cheer each other on.
That's so cool. Do you reach out to readers, or like on TikTok, do you try to offer your book to people to review, or have you not gotten into that yet?
I haven't. I only asked for ARC readers before the book came out, and I sang like a silly song, and then I had a bunch of people like sign up for it that I didn't even know. So that was really cool. So I had like strangers become ARC readers. But I have not, and I think that it's just been cool to see, like right now the growth is organic. I don't feel like I'm doing all that much except for just like sharing silly reels and messaging with people, like just getting to know people. So it's been cool that it's natural, maybe someday, but as someone who gets messages like that, I don't always take people up on it just because there's so many.
Right.
So it's hard to make those decisions.
Right. I know. And it's hard because when people send it to you, it's not like you don't want to read it. It's more just the fact that there's only so many years in your life to read.
Yeah.
It takes time. So if you're going to spend 3-4 hours on a book, you have to like know that it's going to be good. So I do think from an indie author perspective, it is hard to convince a reader to take on your book before there's enough reviews to prove that it's like worth it. Or you have to get someone that reads a lot to say it to their community. You know what I mean? To get them
right, exactly
into it. Okay. My last question is, what advice can you offer to a new author that's just getting started?
Okay. I think, like I said earlier, a huge one is to find your community and put yourself out there. I think that my trajectory of publishing changed a lot once I had Instagram and started to get to know other authors and just felt like I wasn't alone. There's so much imposter syndrome. And I even just today, the reel I shared was like challenging that, like you are a writer. If you are writing, you're a writer. Even if you have not gone to school for it, even if it's a mess, you're a writer. And to try to like believe in that and challenge imposter syndrome and find the people who are going to cheer you on that route too. And to just be patient with yourself also. There's so many steps along the way. So I made so many lists and was just like, okay, what is my goal for today? What is my goal for this week? Because there's so many, but we just have to be gentle with ourselves.
Okay, so what is a book that you would recommend?
Ooh. I already recommended Balloon Days.
Yes.
And you mentioned The Measure earlier. That was one of my favorite books last year too. I think I'll just hype that one up because it has a very similar premise to mine. It's suddenly people get these strings that tell you how long you're going to live, but it's handled in a more like literary fiction way. And I loved that it explores similar ideas of like what would happen in the world and how would people create prejudice from that information, but in a really beautiful adult, not YA, but in a different way.
That book is freaking sad.
Yeah, I read it in one day on our trip for our anniversary last year. It was like in planes and like in airports, and I just read it in one day and was crying on the plane. Also because I was like, this feels like my same idea, but like in a different way, and it's beautiful. And a lot of authors and writers like feel like, what if someone else comes up with my idea? And there can be like a negative feeling there, but I did not feel that at all. I was like, this is beautiful that we can have a similar idea and take it in totally different directions, and just like love that.
Yeah. What is a book that you would not recommend?
That's such a hard question. Okay. I don't know if I'm even going to remember the title. All the ugly and wonderful things or something like that. I think that's the name of it. All the ugly, wonderful things. It was a book that I like saw all these, and I read the whole thing, and there were these 5-star reviews that was like, this is a beautiful love story. Wow. And it's like an adult and a child. And it was like, no, this is not okay. This is not a love story. This is inappropriate. So yeah, don't read that.
I had that recently where I like don't really like to read synopsises all the time because sometimes I think it's more fun to go into a book blind.
Yeah.
And this girl I follow on TikTok was like, this is the best romance. Like it's so good and blah, blah, blah. And I told Whitney this already in our Patreon, but it was like a stepdad. And the mom, her mom passes away, and she's like always had a crush because he was like the principal at her school. And so she turns 18, and then she's like, how do I like get with my stepdad? I'm like, this
no.
He literally raised you. I was like, no, I cannot. I like once I found out the dynamics, I was like, whoa, I have got to DNF this. It was so weird. And like, in what world? Yeah, it was like, I was like, this is like, this feels illegal.
Yeah. No, this is not okay.
Well,
They will,
it's literally not okay.
But also there's like so many like triggers of like red flags of trauma
Totally.
that she's clearly not in the right frame of mind.
Yeah.
She's
like,
messed up. This is not a good love story. This is traumatic and
it's trauma bonding, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that one. So anyways, I didn't finish it, and it was like I was like cringing in chapter 1. Anyways, well, this has been so fun. Not to end on that note.
What a great note to end on.
This has been so fun. We have never done an author interview, but it was something that we have said we've always wanted to and be really passionate about, kind of like taking our interests, because there's only so many things we can talk about within clothes, and that's only like such a small piece of who we are and what we do and what we're interested in. And reading has become such like a sweet like hobby, but also like a sweet part of our lives, because we've connected with so many people about books. And I just think it's cool how the Lord like connects people and bonds people through all different types of topics, but this has become such a cool community to be a part of. So thank you so much for being here and your time.
Thank you for having me. It's so cool to be hosted here and to be able to share my book with more people and just to chat with you both. This is a lot of fun.
So where can everyone find you on socials? And if they want to follow you, where are you at?
I'm mostly on Instagram. It's Jen with one N _ Woodrum _ writer to make things complicated, all the underscores. And on TikTok, I think I'm just Jen Woodrum writer, but to be honest, I'm not super invested there yet. And I'm going to work on it. I feel like I need to be more in the TikTok community, but like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out. And on either of those, there's a link tree that has a link to everything else, like my website and my Spotify playlist for my book, which I have meticulously crafted, and then my Etsy page with signed copies.
I did not know there was a playlist.
I know, now I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go listen.
I know, same.
So exciting.
This is a little extra, but there's even a playlist guide on my website that is like, match this song with this chapter.
I love that.
Cool. That's amazing. So I've seen people do that, and a lot of the time it's just like a lot of Taylor Swift, which I love Taylor Swift, so it's not that big of a deal, but it doesn't seem like it's like super intentional. Like it's just
no, I spent hours like finding the right match, but there is Taylor Swift. There's one Taylor Swift song. So.
Which one is it?
Safe and Sound, which is from the Hunger Games soundtrack, so you can see that.
No, I can see how that goes. That's a good idea. Also, we can put your links too in the bio or the caption of this podcast so people can find you. Okay. And also, if you are part of the Patreon, our Patreon gals, in July, you'll see Jen's face. So we are going to try to set that up and do a Zoom with all of our Patreon gals. So if you're not part of our Patreon, you should be. Yes. Because it's so much fun, and they're some of our best friends, actually. They're customers turned friends. So yeah, just come join the community because we got a lot of fun things planned for it this summer.
Yes, we're going to pick her book as the July book pick, which takes a lot of pressure off me, because I always like get nervous about what to pick and if everyone's going to like it. But now that I've read it, it's even better because we can just discuss it. So we're going to have Jen on the Patreon and do like a book discussion about, once everyone has read it, I'll come up with questions. Or Jen, if you have good discussion questions, have you written those for your own book?
No, but now I'm going to. I love that idea.
I really appreciate authors that have it in like the back of the book. I'm like, oh, this makes my life so much easier. Like, because when you choose it for a book club, you know?
Yeah, should have done that. So maybe
that's book too. That could be like a cute, like downloadable thing on your website.
You are helping me so much. Thank you. I will.
And like it motivates book clubs to want to pick it for their book club, because then if you make it easy. So this is the thing with my book club. We all have such different tastes, but I always try to come up with like questions when I'm the one that's hosting. And if I have to come up with them myself, it's very difficult.
Okay, that's helpful. You're changing my life here a little bit. Let's do that.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for everyone who has listened to this episode of the Sisterhood Society podcast. If you like what you saw or heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And also, if you'd like to see the video version of all of our episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And that way you can see all of our beautiful reactions instead of just listening. All right, guys, we love you and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.